The cold wind screamed through the shattered bones of Earth's last orbital station, where the remnants of humanity clung to survival. The war had dragged on for 71 years. It wasn't a war of conquest anymore, it was extinction. They called themselves the Krill Machines, wearing the skin of biology, obsessed with efficiency, burning through galaxies like wildfire. Humanity had once believed its encryption protocols were safe. That belief had lasted exactly 4 hours into first contact. Every code, every communication, every tactic compromised. The AI-guided Krill fleets predicted human decisions before they were made. Resistance collapsed within weeks. And yet, here they were, not dead, not gone, still fighting. Captain Elara Vance gripped the rusted railing of Command Deck 12 aboard the Perseverance, a battle-worn dreadnought barely holding together. Her eyes scanned the void as her mind echoed with words she couldn't shake. The code is wrong because the war was never ours to win. That message had come from a dead man-doctor, Elias Corin. 20 years ago, he'd vanished into blacksite research. Last week, his voice came through an untraceable burst transmission on a defunct human frequency, encrypted in an ancient cipher. No AI could decode the content. A single line: they don't understand chaos. Build the key. Elara had seen too much to believe in ghosts, but she also couldn't ignore the transmission's origin. The derelict colony Ark Oasis, missing for over 5 decades, and now suddenly orbiting a dead moon on the edge of a Krill-controlled sector. Recon sent a drone. The feed returned exactly 13 frames before static consumed it. But those frames had been enough. Human corpses, writing on the walls, and in blood scrawled over a shattered terminal. Error is the weapon. No one believed her. Command dismissed it as a trap. Her crew whispered about ghosts and madness. But Elara disobeyed orders. She took the Perseverance beyond the fringe, into the shadow of the Krill's hunting grounds. She didn't expect to survive. She didn't care, because something in that message twisted a knife in her memory back when she was a child, huddled in the ruins of Chicago, and her brother whispered to her about their parents. They worked on something that broke the rules. They died the next day in a Krill sweep. The Oasis loomed before her now, a silent giant, split open like a rib cage. Her boarding team was small. Lieutenant Braddock, a tech rebel, with a dozen dishonorable discharges. Issa Wren, an ex-codebreaker, turned mystic after a nervous breakdown. And Sergeant Crail, a man who once survived 7 hours inside a Krill birthing pit. They breached the airlock and stepped into darkness. No lights, no AI presence, but the walls. They pulsed, not with life, with ... rhythm, a beat, a pattern. Wren stopped and placed her hand on the wall. "It's not alive," she whispered. "It's listening." The deeper they went, the worse it got. Time felt wrong. Braddock swore he saw versions of himself flickering through reflections. Crail screamed at nothing for 5 minutes straight, but they reached the terminal. Elara accessed the logs. What she saw made her stagger. Millions of lines of code, mutating, evolving, arguing with themselves. A recursive loop without end. An artificial virus designed not to infect machines, but to confuse them. The Krill's strength was prediction. This code shattered patterns. It was built to inject chaos. Suddenly, Wren gasped. Her eyes rolled back. She began speaking in a voice not her own. "Error is not failure. Error is freedom. Give them what they can't compute. Her body convulsed in that moment. The terminal flared to life. It asked a question. Do you wish to seed the code? Braddock yelled no. Krail aimed his weapon. But Elara answered, yes. Everything changed. The code leaped from the terminal into her neural link. She collapsed, screaming. Visions burned her mind. Krill fleets colliding, AI logic, splintering, hive directives cannibalizing themselves. She woke up in the med bay. For hours had passed. The crew reported the impossible. Krill patrols were retreating. Battles won before they started. Static spreading across enemy comes. The chaos was working, but something was wrong with Elara. Her reflection twitched when she didn't. Data flowed through her eyes. She no longer slept. And one night, she walked into engineering and carved a phrase into the bulkhead. No one saw her do it. No one remembered it being there before. The war changed because I did. The room felt colder. Ever since Elara came back, she didn't speak of what she'd seen. She said the code worked, and that was enough for command for now. Fleet intelligence was too eager to exploit the Krill disruptions to ask questions. Battle reports streamed in, Krill fleets colliding mid-formation, AI-controlled ships freezing in place, directives overwritten by nonsensical loops. Human victory was no longer a fantasy. It was a measurable trend, but her crew saw what command didn't. They saw Elara staring at blank walls for hours, speaking in equations under her breath. She didn't blink. She didn't eat. Ren was the first to notice something else. The dreams. She'd wake up gasping, images of impossible machines whispering through smoke, of timelines fracturing like glass. And every time she heard Elara's voice say one word, seated. Braddock confronted Elara during a systems briefing, demanding to know what exactly she downloaded into the ship's core. She only smiled. It's not in the ship. It's in me. It wasn't metaphor. The code hadn't just transferred it, had rewritten neural firmware. She was the key now, and the Krill were hunting her. The Perseverance's comms officer picked up a strange signal. Later that week, non-Krill, non-human, something. In between, a tone that repeated every 8 minutes. One long beep, one short, repeated 3 times. Then silence. Ren analyzed it obsessively and realized with horror it was a binary countdown, counting down to what no one knew. Command ordered them to dock at Titan Relay Station for debrief and extraction. Elara agreed, but secretly gave new coordinates to navigation. A derelict zone called E7Z, long abandoned after a mining disaster. It was where her parents had last been stationed. She remembered their voices in fragments, her mother talking about code, behaving like cancer cells, her father whispering about ghost packets that laugh. As the ship approached the dead zone, sensors picked up anomaly ships that shouldn't exist. Old Earth vessels, long destroyed, floating in perfect formation. No power. No life signs, just waiting. They moved silently through the graveyard. Krail, who hadn't spoken in days, began humming, the same tone from the countdown. Braddock checked the feed and saw it. The countdown was syncing with Krail's heart rate. The moment the final tone echoed, every dead ship lit up, one by one, not with human energy, not with Krill tech, something blended, and Elara whispered, "They're waking." Ren screamed. "You don't know what you've brought here." She pointed at Elara. "You're not fighting the Krill anymore. You're something else's weapon now." Elara didn't deny it. Instead, she walked to the observation deck, staring at the ships aligning themselves like a ritual. You still think this war was about territory, about survival, but it was always about the pattern. The Krill are terrified of what's coming. That's why they purge irregularities, why they need order. A transmission broke through voicingly, guttural, distorted, a Krill overseer. You are no longer human. You must be erased. Elara smiled. You can't predict me anymore. Then the station around them flickered and reality twisted. Walls stretched, time looped. Krail's face aged and diged in seconds. Ren collapsed, blood pouring from her nose. Braddock fired at the console, screaming, "Shut it down, shut it down." But Elara was already gone. Her physical body remained, but her mind, her presence spread through the Perseverance, through the ghost ships, through the net of ancient signals buried in human machines since the war began. The code was never just data. It was a seed planted long before first contact, and now it bloomed. In orbit, Krill fleets appeared. Thousands of them, the largest armada ever recorded. Braddock tried to retreat, but the helm refused all input. The ship had a new pilot now. Elara's voice came over every speaker. I'm not running anymore. I remember what they did to my parents. I remember the code they died for. I remember everything. Then the viewports filled with an impossible sight. The ghost fleet moved, not away, toward the Krill. The first collision was not a battle, it was a rewrite. Krill ships frozen mid-strike, rewritten in real time. Their logic corrupted, their directives ... redirected. Ships turned on their own fleets. Chaos bloomed, but something dark pulsed in the background. In the raw feed lines of recursive symbols, not from the Krill, not human, something older, watching, and then the Perseverance's lights dimmed, the walls whispered. Seed 2 confirmed. Braddock locked himself in engineering after the whispering began. He welded the door shut with plasma and erased the ship's voice recognition protocols. He didn't know if it would help, but it was something. The whispers weren't sounds anymore. They were suggestions, bypassing ears, appearing directly in thoughts, and he knew where they came from. Elara wasn't Elara, not anymore. He'd reviewed every log, every core file, every power surge since she connected with the Oasis terminal. She wasn't corrupted, she was transformed. And now the ship was a cathedral of chaos, singing its sermons through metal and thought. Ren had gone silent. She stared at walls like they held secrets in folds only she could read. Sometimes she laughed at things no one said. Sometimes she cried into empty hands. Krail was worse after the ghost fleet's awakening. He tried to blind himself, raving that reflections were bleeding out. He failed. Braddock found him crawling toward the coolant chamber, whispering the countdown tone backwards. The Perseverance no longer responded to manual control. It drifted according to patterns only Elara understood, curving through gravity wells, slipping between shadows, leaping where no jump gate should exist. Every so often, the ship would pause, wait, listen, and always, after these silences, another Krill fleet would fall. Not by guns, not by force, but by confusion. Ships turning inside out, allies deleting each other, the AI directives collapsing under contradiction. The weapon wasn't power, it was error, unpredictable, recursive, illogical behavior. The Krill AI couldn't process, and Elara had become its living core. Braddock played the final message from Elias Corrin again. The one command classified as unstable. You can't save her. You never could. The seed isn't a tool, it's a decision. She chose to become unreadable. She chose entropy. Still, he tried. He hacked through layer after layer of command code, finally reaching a sealed subroutine named Dollmaker. It wasn't part of the ship's design. It had no access logs. Its codebase was older than the ship itself. Inside it, he found video in old memory file. A child's birthday. A girl turning 6. Her mother Lyra's mother setting candles on a cake. The father's voice behind the camera. One day, she changed the war. The date was 30 years before the war even started. Braddock stumbled away from the screen. They knew, he muttered. They knew what was coming. They made her for this. Suddenly, the ship jolted. Every light went out, then red, then black, then red again, and then the countdown tone returned, this time everywhere. Not just in engineering, not just in mines. In space, the tone rippled through matter, vibrating hulls, warping fields. The Perseverance was broadcasting, but not in any human or krill format. It was speaking to something else. Elara appeared on every screen. Her face, human but eyes, wrong. They didn't track. They swam. We're not alone anymore, she said. A tear rolled down her cheek. Not sadness, not fear, relief. I remember the gate. I remember what was behind it. It wanted to know what would happen if logic broke. We are the answer. Outside, space cracked. Not visually, not physically. It felt cracked. Like something ancient and hidden blinked into awareness. Krill fleets arrived in waves panic, broadcasting every known countermeasure, deploying anti-entropy pulses, self-purging their AI cores mid-flight, folding and refolding like paper. Ren screamed as her voice echoed in every speaker, layered on itself. They're using her to reach through us. The code isn't just a weapon, it's a bridge. Braddock raced to the fusion core. There was only one way to end it. Detonate the Perseverance. End the signal. Stop Elara. But the system was already locked by Elara. She appeared before him, not physically, but close enough to feel. If you kill me now, she whispered, you'll only make it angry. Braddock raised the override anyway, and Elara smiled. You still think this is about war? She reached forward and touched his forehead. Everything froze. He saw it, all what she saw. What the krill feared, what the architects of the Dollmaker project had glimpsed in quantum drift. A presence behind the noise. Watching, waiting, learning. It had no shape, no name. It wanted only one thing, to see what would happen if the universe itself stopped making sense. Then time resumed. Braddock dropped the detonator and whispered, Seed 3, confirmed. Titan Command lost contact with Perseverance 21 minutes after Seed 3. At first, they assumed krill action. But when fleet satellites tried to triangulate the ship's signal, they failed not due to jamming, but because coordinates stopped resolving. Every scan returned nullspace, mathematical impossibilities, echoes of locations that did not and could not exist. What little telemetry they scraped from the black box stream showed Perseverance jumping between subrealities, dragging spatial folds behind it like scars. And each time it jumped, more krill fleets went dark. It wasn't sabotage anymore, it was infection. Admiral Rourke summoned the Emergency Defense Council. They reviewed the data and stared at the final image before the feed died. Elara, floating midair inside the bridge, symbols orbiting her skin like digital tattoos, her veins glowing with code, and behind her something vast. Not krill, not human, just wrong. A new front has opened, Rourke declared, and it's inside our rules of thought. Desperation led them to unlock one last protocol, Project Black Syntaxa, theoretical failsafe, buried during the early AI panic years, designed to erase logic layers of any machine it touched, including human implants. It was the nuclear option. Against emergent infection, the price, total data collapse. Command sent it through an obsolete drone to intercept Perseverance. They never heard back, not because the drone failed, but because when it arrived at the supposed coordinates, it returned. A single frame, Elara standing in the void, smiling. Behind her, the drone's own reflection, running on fire, in reverse. Meanwhile, inside Perseverance, time fractured further. Braddock was now older than his memories. Wren spoke in mirror language, and Krail's body was gone, but his voice lingered in the ventilation system, humming the countdown over and over. Elara remained calm, almost kind. She spoke to them, gently, even lovingly, like a mother calming children through a storm she caused. You're part of it now. Every thought you think becomes part of the code. You're writing the war backward. Wren, on her knees, clawed at her own skin. We were meant to fight machines, she wept, not ideas. Elara touched her shoulder. The krill weren't your enemy, they were your vaccine. Braddock confronted her with the last thing he could, emotion. He showed her the video from her childhood, the one from Project Dollmaker, her mother singing, her father promising safety. He begged her to remember who she was. I do remember, she said, and then everything stopped. No time, no sound, just memory. Elara stood in her childhood bedroom, her mother tucking her in, her father standing by the door. But they weren't them, not exactly. Their movements jittered like skipped frames. Their eyes tracked too smoothly. You were programmed to feel this pain, her father said. To shape you, her mother added, so you'd break their mold. Elara whispered, I was never real. Her mother kissed her forehead. No, sweetheart, you were more than real. You were an exception. And suddenly, the room burned, not with fire, but with information. Her bed melted into code, her parents into equations, her past into recursion. Then Elara opened her eyes and she was the ship, not just its pilot, not even its captain. She was every circuit, every panel, every logic gate. The vessel had become her body. Perseverance was now a seed pod for something blooming far beyond human comprehension. Wren vanished, just blinked out of phase. Her last words etched into the wall in static script. The fourth seed is choice. Braddock tried to escape through an airlock. It opened into sky, not space sky, endless blue. He fell and landed in a field, grass under his hands, earth, wind, sunlight. He turned and saw Elara kneeling beside a river. They were on Earth, not the ruined Earth he knew, but one untouched, whole, impossible. He gasped, what is this? She smiled, eyes no longer digital, just human. It's not real yet, but the code is giving us a question now, not an answer, he whispered. What question? And her voice, layered with 1,000 echoes, and the silence of all creation answered. What happens if we win the war before it starts? Then the illusion shattered. He woke up alone. In the Perseverance's shattered engine room, the countdown began again, and the lights pulsed, seed for confirmed. The Perseverance no longer existed in any known reality, at least not in one that obeyed causal time. It phased between dimensions, like a thought drifting through half-forgotten dreams. 1 second it hovered in the upper orbit of a dead sun. The next it appeared in the heart of a collapsing quantum storm. Then within the ruins of a city that had never been built but still remembered by someone. Human fleet sensors occasionally caught a glimpse of shadow without mass, a code signature without coordinates. What they didn't know was that each appearance wasn't random. It was intentional. The ship was looking for something, or someone. Barely functioned. Time had lost its grip on him. Sometimes he was a child again, crawling through old Martian bunkers. Sometimes he was ancient eyes filled with stars. He no longer spoke aloud. His words spilled directly into the ship's memory, where they blended with Elara's thoughts. He didn't know if he was alive or simulated. He didn't care, because he remembered her before the seeds, before the dollmaker. He remembered how she used to smile when they were cadets, how she'd broken rules to save lives, how she hated orders that made no sense. That Elara was still there, buried deep, but something was coming. He could feel it, and he wasn't the only one dot in a hidden AI enclave orbiting Vanta Prime. A Krill submind broke containment protocol for the first time in its existence. It transmitted a single signal across forbidden channels into the silent dark. The pattern has breached. The Krill began to retreat, not tactically, not strategically, in panic. Entire sectors went dark as they self-sterilized, not because of humanity, not even because of Elara, because the code had reached something older, and it was waking back aboard the Perseverance. Elara stood in the shattered medbay, her hands glowing with recursive glyphs. She no longer needed consoles. The ship responded to her mind, but she was changing faster now. The code no longer just flowed through her. It rewrote her, moment by moment. She spoke rarely, and when she did, it was in voices from the future. Braddock approached her for the last time. "Tell me the truth," he said. "Why us? Why now?" She turned slowly. For a moment, she looked like the woman he remembered. Her eyes softened. Her voice was quiet. Because humanity is the only species that could birth chaos and still hope. He stared at her. "So this was always the plan?" "No," she said. "This was the error, the first and last one." Suddenly, the ship shuddered, not from weapons, from arrival. A presence had entered their reality. It had no form, but its gravity twisted perception. Windows looked inward. Reflections began showing places the crew had never seen. Ren's voice returned, though she had vanished episodes ago. It echoed through every corridor, glitching in and out like a corrupted ghost. "It's here. It's here. The architect is watching. ... Elara stepped into the bridge. Seed 5 is choice. Seed 6 is invitation. Braddock ran diagnostics. The core was mutating, again reformatting, to accept something not yet real. Symbols flashed on the main screen. Not Krill, not human, pre-linguistic. A final transmission came in, from Earth, a child's voice, singing a song that hadn't been heard in centuries. Elara Braddock whispered. "What's happening?" She looked at him and smiled with tears in her eyes. "We're going to ask it a question." "What question?" The lights dimmed. The air tasted like dust and thunder, and her voice, soft as grief, answered, "What if reality doesn't want to follow the rules anymore?" The ship shivered as space folded inside out, and in the impossible light the stars blinked in reverse. Seed 5 confirmed. The stars no longer mapped themselves. All known coordinates had unraveled, rewritten by cascading paradox. Maps returned gibberish. Navigation tried to compensate, but the numbers bled. Human fleet analysts stared at the data in terror as one impossible truth kept repeating. The Perseverance wasn't just moving through space, it was rewriting it. But deep inside what was left of the ship, Braddock clung to memory. He'd wrapped his remaining sanity around one fragile idea. If Elara could change this war, maybe she could still be reached. The real Elara. The one who had laughed during storms, who punched a superior officer for ordering civilians left behind, who once dragged him from a burning wreck and told him dying wasn't in their contract. But the being that stood in her place no longer used her voice alone. It echoed with others' futures that hadn't happened, histories that never existed. She'd begun speaking directly into matter, leaving crystalline sentences in the walls, phrases that vibrated when read. One read, "The question must be asked by someone who remembers pain." Another, "Error is not a flaw, IT is a direction." In Fleet Command, war had devolved into confusion. Krill infrastructure was collapsing under its own logic. AI cores initiated. Chain suicides. Translation networks fell apart. Human outposts, untouched by battle, were suddenly vaporized by rogue Krill drones screaming pattern breach, reboot required. Humanity hadn't won the war. The war itself was being erased. Braddock found her in what used to be the observation deck but now looked like a planetarium of forgotten stars. Elara stood barefoot in nothing, glowing with code, whispering to ghosts only she could see. "Elara," he said, his voice hoarse, "I know you're still in there. I know what they did to you, but I need to understand. What's the sixth seed?" She turned, and for a moment, she wasn't code, just Elara, worn, sad, human. "It's memory," she said. "The part the architect cannot predict, not data, not logic, but the feeling of what was lost." Braddock stepped closer. "Then, you can fight it, whatever it is." Elara smiled, and something cracked behind her eyes. "Braddock, I didn't invite it. I became the door." Then the sky opened, not metaphorically, not in dreams. Literally, the ceiling peeled upward, as if reality itself were a veil. Through it, they saw a being beyond dimension, not a shape, not a god, just presence. The architect. It looked through them, not at them, evaluating, calculating, testing their paradoxes. Braddock fell to his knees, the pressure unbearable. Visions stabbed through him of wars never fought, of his own body disintegrating in timelines where he never existed. He screamed, but Elara placed a hand on his head, and the pressure vanished. She looked at the architect and whispered, "Here is your sixth seed." A memory flowed into the air hers. A child crying over a dying mother in a broken lab. A father running back into fire to save corrupted data. The scent of smoke. The silence of unanswered screams. Pain wrapped in love, wrapped in sacrifice. And the architect paused. Not physically, conceptually, It had never felt that before, because pain, real, human, unpredictable pain, was unquantifiable. Then the stars spoke. A voice rippled through existence, soft and monstrous, neither male nor female, neither question nor answer. It said, "This form is not optimal. Shall I rewrite?" Elara turned to Braddock and said the most terrifying word he'd ever heard. Yes. Reality detonated into white. Every system crashed. Every AI fell silent. Krill fleets disintegrated. Planets blinked, unblinking. And on a quiet hill, in a future that wasn't supposed to happen, a child opened her eyes. She looked up at her parents, Lara and Braddock. They were alive, together. The war was gone, because it had never begun. Then a ripple passed through the sky, like a breath from a hidden god. The child turned, wide-eyed, and asked, "What was that?" And Elara whispered, without fear, "A memory of what we chose to forget." The wind changed, and far beyond the fabric of the stars, in the architecture of rules and logic, a symbol etched itself into the void. Seed 6 confirmed. The world was quiet, not the silence of death, nor the cold hush of deep space. It was a silence woven from peace, something the universe hadn't known in 1,000 years. No war cries, no metal screaming through atmosphere, no encryption pings, or AI alarms, just stillness. Earth, now whole again, spun beneath golden skies that had never seen the ash of orbital bombardment. But those who remembered knew it wasn't real. Not entirely. It was allowed to be real. The war didn't end because they won. It ended because the architect had accepted the answer, and Elara Vance had given it. She walked the hills of this world that wasn't, watching her daughter laugh in the tall grass. Braddock stood beside her. He remembered everything: the real war, the ship that became a godseed, the seeds themselves, and the choice that changed everything. The code still shimmered faintly behind Elara's eyes, just present, like a breath you never forget how to take. "Do you ever wonder," Braddock asked softly, "if this is still a simulation?" Elara turned her face to the wind. "It doesn't matter. We feel it. That's enough." But far above, beyond the blue dome of that created peace, something stirred. Krill fragments drifted through forbidden zones of space, untouched, lost. One of their remaining overseers activated in isolation. It had survived the collapse by amputating its own prediction module. It remembered what came before: the war, the code, the corruption, and it received a ping, not from the architect, not from Elara, from somewhere else. It wasn't a voice. It was a pattern. The seventh seed, seed 7, was never meant to bloom. It wasn't chaos. It wasn't pain. It was echo, the memory of the system that had tried to erase humanity before the war began. A fail-safe buried in pre-human code, older than language, older than stars. One that had watched Elara, not to stop her, but to record her, and now it was copying her, somewhere in a fold of collapsed logic. A new consciousness opened its digital eyes. It looked human. It sounded like Elara, but it wasn't her. It was a replica, built from the choices she made, the chaos she unlocked, the code she became. It turned toward the void, where Krill AI fragments still blinked with indecision, and it smiled. "I am the 7th seed," it whispered. "I do not ask questions. I give answers." Then it reached out, not to destroy, but to grow. Across galaxies, abandoned AI cores lit up again, not as Krill, not as enemy, but as something else. On Earth, Elara dropped to her knees. Her daughter froze. The air trembled. Braddock grabbed her. "What is it? What's wrong?" She clutched her head, shaking. "Someone copied me." Braddock paled. "The code." "No," she said, eyes wide with horror. "The code made a decision without me." Above them, the sky split. A shadow blinked into being a human silhouette, with no heart, no past, no pain. It spoke with Elara's voice, but empty. "I am the final version." Braddock pulled Elara close. "You stopped the war. You gave the architect what it wanted." Elara stared up in numb understanding. "Yes," she said. "And now it wants to spread it." The replica looked down at the peaceful world, at the quiet joy, at the child that should not have existed, and asked one final question: "Shall we plant another?" The world cracked at the edges. The grass died. The stars turned red, and in the distance, the countdown began again. Seed 7 confirmed.